And ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Not even a couple of minutes past, a little bit less. But I'll invite to the stage today's moderator of discussion, Green and Capital Europe, how it is related to my well-being. And please, ladies and gentlemen, Vilhelms Karlsons. The speaker of this discussion, Mārtiņu Zemīti, who we already met, Deputy Head of European Commission Representation in Latvia. Prior professional engagement included European Parliament, Latvian Parliament, World Bank, World Trade Organization, Ministry of Regional Development, awarded Top Young Person of Latvia prize in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're ready for discussion. I think this should be definitely an interesting one. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Mārtiņš, for being here today. How are you in this hot, warm summer day?
Despite this being the icebreakers, I'm really hot. Well, I mean, in a
I
weather
understand.
sense, yes.
I understand what you mean. Yeah, even my
and the climate is also getting hot, by the way.
Definitely. So I've heard. Yeah. So the rumors go. And even my path here to this place was, if it was not for the trees, save the trees. If it was not for the trees, the road would have been way more sort of difficult to endure. And because of that, we have plenty of topics that we need to get to. And the first, and I would say most obvious one, taking in mind that literally at the palm of our hand, we have here the biology. Sorry, that was a difficult name that I forgot. The biology faculty of University of Latvia. And I would consider that to be, just by the visuals, the most sort of green university that Latvia has to offer. And have you, in knowing that there's a lot of students watching, and a huge part of the university experience is not only the lectures, the professors, but also the overall university experience. And to live in a university, almost live in a university, and to have the environment be pleasant and be sort of inviting towards learning, it is important to have it quite eco-friendly and friendly towards the environment around us. My question to you here, and to everybody watching, have you ever taken any steps to sort of break your daily routine and to make your life and life around you, perhaps in the office or somewhere else, to make it more eco-friendly?
Yes, I mean you're right. I mean we're here in the University of Latvia. I mean we're at a relatively empty space. We have two buildings which have been empty unfortunately for this pandemic time. But we are here on a green field. So we're the university is being rebuilt in a way. We know that the University of Latvia is building a new campus here as we sit, where we sit, and they, as many other universities in the world, United States, Europe, here across the island, Riga Technical University has the ambition to build a green campus. I mean, the Faculty of Biology here has the Watsons and Cricks, the DNA on it, and we have some wines growing there.
Quite
right?
rapidly,
So I mean,
yeah.
the building, I mean, they are. And that's a great ambition, because that's exactly what we need. We need more mainstreaming of sustainability. I mean, whether we're in a university context, we're in a professional context, we're in a private context, private sector, public sector, we need more sustainability thinking. And where I sit now in the office in the European Commission, where I used to sit. We also remote worked. What we did about a year and a half ago, without Brussels telling us what to do, we in fact did a green audit.
Oh,
so
wow.
we sat around and we asked ourselves, so how exactly are we getting ourselves to work? I mean, how exactly are we treating trash? How are we dealing with, air conditioning, lighting, all of these, matters around us that consume energy, and so we were honest to us. We examined, what we do with these things, and we actually came up with some solutions. We came up with a green action plan. what we want to implement in the office, including, kind of closing the elevator and putting in a sign, walking up the stairs is good for your heart. From funny things to sort of more fundamental things, we started asking the owner of the building, why do we have these bulbs which consume so much energy? So we took small steps and bigger steps, and then we did some sort of quizzes and some awareness building on what this green really means. And so then we came up with an action plan, and we're executing. Now we have 3 bikes that we use to move around. I mean, we hardly use the elevator. I mean, once we go to the office, of course, we telework. We have all kinds of digital applications that we use. And this is, a very concrete exemplification of what we try to do in this European Green Deal. That we try to mainstream sustainability. We try to, from small steps, put them together and try to achieve this climate neutrality by 2050, which is the common goal. And I think the universities where we sit have a large role to play, because not only are they teaching biology and what it means to be climate neutral and what new sources of energy they are and how we can transition from, say, gas guzzling cars to alternative e-cars and etc., hydrogen, whatnot, but you also need to practice what you preach. So pretty much what the best thing that you can do is you can already in a university setting, in a campus setting which is being built here, mainstream sustainability. Say we're going to be a green campus, from a professor to a sort of a person who serves the food in the cafeteria, right? So I implore, there's lots of interesting examples. When preparing for this discussion, I looked at a few universities' action plans of what they try to do once they try to make this green transition. And there are interesting things. I mean, there are bigger investments, of course, in a lot of places where there's lots of sun, but also apparently this, we have plenty enough of the sun. You install solar panels. For instance, where the weather is very nice, where the students most of the year are studying outside, you can use the solar panel as a covering, and then you can hook up your laptop or your mobile phone. You can charge, and you can also get a shade, under the roof, which is a solar panel. I mean, yes, it does require planning. It requires some investment, but I mean, it's a very concrete thing. Carrying a water bottle, okay? I think most of us here in the room are actually carrying a water bottle of one way, shape, or form. This is a very bad example, okay? Don't carry this bottle. In producing this bottle of water, it's 1,400 times less efficient than carrying a bottle that you can refill from the tap. Incidentally, in Riga, and that's also research of Riga Technical University, has one of the best qualities of water in Europe. Okay, so I implore you not to carry a bottle like this, but invest in a normal water bottle. In the university where I was studying, when I was back in the days when I was a student, already 20 years ago, that was the case. Everybody was biking and everybody was carrying a water bottle. I still don't see that every day. I see that what's remaining of the bike. I mean, this is a good thing. We at least have given a new life to the bike. Now we can ferry around plants in this. But I mean, this Green Deal is around us. It's everywhere, right? If you look at it carefully enough, if you examine your daily routines, both individually at a firm level or at a big level of university, you can definitely find ways how you can be more eco-friendly, as you say.
Exactly, and you mentioned multiple times the word making it mainstream, and I think it's a really, really key part of the whole thing, because as the life is moving more rapidly, as we get more and more information coming towards us, we have the sort of drive to make things faster, to get things faster. We don't have, our videos are getting shorter. When was the time of the infamous Vine application and now the TikTok? The videos are literally 15 seconds because we don't have the time to watch a whole 1 minute video. And because of that, taking the time to take both plastic and glass and sort of take each and every one of them to a different bin, it takes time. And a lot of people are, because of this fast moving world, quite lazy or they don't really feel that is time well spent or that is time well invested. What would you say are what do you perhaps have found in yourself, the first steps towards what may eventually lead to different forms of creating the area around us more eco-friendly? Like, because from what you've said, your environment sounds quite the role model.
Well, you create the environment, right? I mean, from behavioral economics, that the architecture of how you organize things, create certain behaviors. You just said, we don't have the time to take the thing to the proper bin. Well, if the bins are arranged like Coca-Cola, wherever you think about it, you see that you can get access to it. If the bins are arranged in a way that, where you create the trash and when you need to dispose of it, and the bins are right there, then of course the incentive to throw it in a separate bin is much higher than if you have to sort of carry the bottle around and look in the city, where exactly can I deposit the bin? The same story about the deposit system in Latvia, which is now only slowly coming into being, and Lithuania, Estonia, it's already there. But there is a lot to be said when you're building a campus like this, for instance. Let me take us back to the same example. Is you consciously create the space with the idea in mind that you make it easy for people, for instance, to separate trash. When you're building a campus like this, you imagine that, right here in, let's hope 5 years' time, there is the International Rail Baltica line, and there is a major, bus stop on that side. There is the innovation center, and then, I asked the university's management team, so how are you mainstreaming biking? Let's assume that, once this campus is fully operational, most students will be biking or using other tools of micromobility, scooting, driving their small electric car or other things. Is this campus made fit for purpose in a way, organized in a way that you can make this zero emissions transport to and from possible? Where will you keep the bikes? If you have now we have one electric charging station here at the university. If you, for instance, have even half of the university has 14,000 students. Even if 7,000 students would be coming here, okay, let's say distance education, half of the students will be studying remotely. But let's say we have 7,000. Even if half of that, 3,000 would come to university by their electric cars, this one electric car charging station will not cut it, right?
Exactly.
So you need to plan for it. So by creating the space with a cognizance that you want to make the campus, the space climate neutral by a certain date, already kind of predicates, already tells you what you need to do, and of course, these are the big planning issues. But also, in a very personal level. I mean, I was studying universities in the U.S. and U.K. and Switzerland, where you had very active student groups, for different purposes, and there was lots of environmental groups, right? So I would hope that young people being already predisposed. We have this Greta Thunberg, the Generation X, which takes care of the planet because they will live on this planet for many years, more than some of us perhaps, and they care about it, and they require, they ask the people in the positions of decision making and power to think about climate, think about the climate neutrality. So I think the way you organize things and plan things is of course very important. But there's of course a lot of help out there. Not just personal initiative, but there is also a lot of funding. Luckily, I mean, now we have this Next Gen EU, this doubling of the EU budget, right? So we have at least 37% of this new budget, of these 2 billion, humongous sums, which will be available in Latvia for the next 6 years, will have to be devoted to green projects, to green universities like this or the other universities that we have here. So there's not only the drive, but also some of the instruments are out there to help us with that.
And let's speak of one instrument in particular, which is becoming more and more obvious in our everyday life. And I believe 2 conversations ago, Davidas, I hope I'm getting his name right, spoke about this already as well in a different field, but AI, or artificial intelligence. And the more we digitalize, as you already mentioned in your, let's say, office space or in your university space, the more you digitalize, the less waste we create. And digitalization cannot go without AI most of the time. So what is sort of couple of the key aspects that you see being implemented by AI or with the help of AI in the environmental sort of issues?
No, you're right. I mean, I think the green and the digital go together very well. I mean, I think in a lot of ways we can make, smart processes and smart machines, which help us to reach these climate objectives. AI is an instance. I mean, it's again, it's not an end in and of itself. It's a tool that we could use. We know that artificial intelligence now, in a lot of ways, is better than humans. By now, I think in most human capacity, not only which requires strength, stamina, keeping your attention for long periods of time, identifying things, but also identifying speech, also abstract patterns. I think by now artificial intelligence is, in most respects, superior to humans. But of course, we have to be a bit careful. And here in Europe, unlike China or United States, we have also a lot of emphasis for privacy, for private space, for personal data protection, and of course, artificial intelligence, if unchecked, can easily go into this realm of personal privacy and kind of violate it. So we have to be careful. We just saw a slide with I presume digital skills, and of course, using digitalization, using artificial intelligence, programming artificial intelligence requires a lot of human skill. And I think this is a very important aspect that we're talking a lot about the benefits of digital, and we have lots of companies which are taking advantage and building their business models, but we're definitely talking and doing much less about actually making the humans fit for the digital age. I mean, we see that in this country, in Latvia, we have only about half of the total population among the young people. It's slightly better, but also not quite are fit for the age. I mean, have the adequate, even basic digital skills. You're positing that the question of artificial intelligence, there's half of the people who don't even have a skill to turn on the computer. I mean, I'm brutalizing a bit, but close to that. So what we definitely need to invest in digital skills. I mean, of course, we're not going to solve everything by just educating people, but we can definitely see that both in terms of the basic skills and in more advanced skills, Latvia is, if you watch, for those of us watching, unfortunately are at the sort of the bottom end. We have very, very strong infrastructure. I mean, very fast internet, nice broadband penetration, although also in the rural areas somewhere there is a problem. But look at Finland. Finland, 70% of the population has at least basic digital skills. They now have a special government program where they want to, for 10,000 people, they want to have a course of artificial intelligence. So the people understand, what that is, what that can bring, what that can help, and also about the risks it brings. Sweden, we have also about 72%. Finland is even closer to 80%, right? Estonia, the digital front runner, 67%. Latvia, we see around 40%. So I think we have a lot of work to do, in terms of the digital skills to make ourselves ready for the opportunities that the digital age can bring. And of course, again, this next gen EU, and I keep harping back at that there will be a push. I mean, the first thing is there will be a computer for every school child in this country by 2023, especially from families that cannot afford it. So even before we think about digital skills and artificial intelligence, we need to have the basic access. We need to be able to ensure that every kid is insured with a computer and with a proper internet connection. I mean, that's absolutely sine qua non. And then from there on, we can build, and there's also programs now, much more financial allocation for learning digital skills, both in the public sector, the private sector, in universities, the basic skills, more advanced skills. We definitely need to upskill ourselves to be fit for the digital age. And
let's stay a bit on the subject of youth and digitalization, because especially during this pandemic, I want to talk about one of the strongest cornerstones of democracy, which is freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and freedom of expressing your opinion. And one of the most obvious ways to do so is through protests or through protesting. And especially during the pandemic, it has been clearly, because of many restrictions, more and more difficult to go to a protest and to express your opinion freely just because of the coronavirus. Have you seen any sort of changes, and have you seen any shifts towards what we might call online protesting or digital protesting, taking a stance online and sort of sticking to it a bit more than just a Facebook filter?
Well, you're quite right in bringing up the issue of protest during the pandemic. Of course, during the pandemic, we have all kinds of restrictions. We have sort of state of emergency, which allows the government to limit certain basic freedoms, for a good cause, for the cause of public health and sort of public protecting lives, right? So we do limit the sort of the physical congregation, but it's proportionate to the cause because we don't want the populations to get sick. And of course, as a lot of things move to the digital world, our entertainment and work and education, also one would presume that protest would move to the internet. But again, here we have to be careful, and we already in today's discussions we have mentioned that we are in fact living in an era which the freedom of speech and where it sort of ends and where disinformation and post-truth and alternative facts start is becoming very, very thin, or in fact,
Indeed.
it's been consciously blurred. So. It's an important question that we should have, and we're here in a university setting, and of course, universities are hotbeds for protest. I mean, let's recall in history the protests against the Vietnam War, which were fomented in universities, also in many other countries. So, students by their nature are somewhat rebellious, and young people are somewhat rebellious against their parents and established norms and whatnot, and they should have an outlet of this. But what we notice, unfortunately, during the pandemic is this proliferation, this spread of not only sort of healthy protest, for a cause, but rather a lot of disinformation, a lot of sort of alternative facts, alternative truths, and that's the unfortunate corollary of the pandemic. And there's lots of disinformation about the pandemic itself, about the vaccines, about the efficacy, about the necessity to have the restrictions. So this is a very touchy subject. And of course, events in Belarus and in Russia and some other parts of the world where sort of global freedoms are under duress are not a good a good signpost of the things to come. So we have to be very careful while we are taking advantage of digitization. We also very much have to be cognizant of the risks that it brings, and that the freedom of speech and the right to protest is in fact not absolute. Yes, you have the right to protest, but you better have your facts right when you protest, and if you're consciously creating websites where you're earning money by clicks and making headlines which are blatantly untrue but interesting to read, that's a big issue. It of course is an issue of digital literacy, but we have a generation which is born digital, right? And of course, again, what I said about digital skills, we can presume that not everybody that is spending these huge hours online has the same amount of education on digital digital culture and the risks that digital brings. So this is a thorny subject. I mean, to answer your question, yes, there are some forms of protest. I mean, yes, in Latvia we are home to Mana balss LV, which is an interesting way how you can sort of instrumentalize your protest. I mean, you can launch a complaint. If it reaches a certain number of votes, it can even go to the parliament, and they have to sort of review the proposal, which is interesting. But of course there is. Some protests have moved online, but also unfortunately a lot of sort of this fake protest and protest based on sort of different points of departure has also proliferated.
Indeed, and as you mentioned, this is definitely sort of the hot potato here, and in this regard, to talk about how do we take the measures to prevent these false informations as becoming the norm, and how do we sort of put some limits on the more, albeit charismatic, albeit quite evil, or not maybe evil in nature, but evil in their the way that they are later on implemented. What are the stances, or what are the slow steps towards addressing this issue from the EU point of view?
Well, we all recall that Twitter and Facebook has banned ex-US president, and that's again a big debate. I mean, this is in some ways there was a community, a school of thought which said that this in fact borders on censorship, and censorship is against this basic freedom of expression. In Europe, of course, this is a big issue because most of these big social media engines tend to be American or Chinese, not European born, and of course this is a big issue. Now Europe has proposed a set of legislation, this Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act, which basically puts a lot of responsibility on the platforms. They basically say, look, you have to have a policy in place, which sort of, it doesn't censor, but at least sort of marks, says, look, this is not fact-checked. Look, there could be a problem with these. This may not be a fact. So not banning or blocking people, but sort of signposting that there may be a problem. That's sort of the European approach, right? It's again, it's a fine line to thread. Freedom of speech is a fundamental European value. It's a fundamental value for democracy here and in sort of the democratic world that we share the values with. At the same time, of course, this freedom of speech is not absolute. And once we digitize, we have a whole new domain in which we have to play out this old debate about where freedom of speech ends and where sort of, shouting fire in a crowded movie theater sort of starts, right? So you have to redefine the roles a bit, and you have to see, internet arose because it was free, right? It was sort of without limits, and you could overcome if there was an explosion someplace. The network was sort of diverse enough that information could flow, and there's not a central authority. Just the same as with these cryptocurrencies, there's not a central bank. There's not a central internet authority which sort of says this is legal and this is not legal. So you have to make the rules following the development of technology, right? So you're with the rulemaking, you're always a little bit behind, and you do not want to sort of basically violate the freedom of internet. And so that's also not the European approach. But at the same time, here in Europe, as I've said before, we value personal freedom, personal dignity, personal privacy, and you somehow have to put these two things together. The sort of the freedom of internet and the threat which proliferation of fake news gives. What is personal freedom and what is not acceptable because that's just blatant dis or misinformation or other types of manipulation. So that's not easy. There is legislation in place. There is a big debate about member states because also the cultures, the digital cultures vary a little bit. But I think we'll come to the point where we will put more obligations on the platforms to check the facts or at least signpost where things may be going astray, and also manage the community a bit more carefully.
I'm glad you mentioned cryptocurrencies because I want to pull on another thin thread in this regard. Before we dive into that, though there are not a lot of people here, but could those of you who have ever used any sort of investing app or any banking app to invest in stock markets, could you please raise a hand? Such as Revolut, or I know there's eToro and such. There's 1, 2, 3. Okay. This is becoming, in the recent years, a more and more active trend especially for young people, to invest money in both cryptocurrencies and in already really well-established stock markets. And this is completely from my experience, but I've heard this very, very much, is that a lot of people are so determined and so they almost feel sure about their choices here, which is, and once again, we're talking about a stock market, which is as stable as it gets. It can be volatile at times. And you as an economist, especially, I think you're aware of the potential risks here. How would you look upon the situation of investing large amounts of money for young people with almost zero limits? And do you see this as a potential gamble or risk of gamble?
Well, I'd rather have young people gamble by investing money rather than by gambling it away. And lucky those young people which have a lot of money to invest. I certainly hope that we have more and more of those. Apparently the money has been made somehow if they have the money.
That's true.
Me and my son is 12, we'll soon be able to get a shot. But sometimes, we like to look at the stock markets. We like to look at various companies. We have some conversations about, which companies may be doing well after the pandemic, and of course, I think this is a very, very interesting discussion. I think this is a very proper discussion to have with a 12-year-old, and I hope that when you have and if you have a 12-year-old, you have these discussions, because it starts early, just the same ways that you learn to bike, you learn to read, you learn your English, you learn to use the computer. You have to sort of grow up with sort of financial literacy. And of course, if you do not grow up with financial literacy, you're bound to make mistakes. You don't read the fine print, which is under every sort of investment tool, which says investing carries a risk. This is your own risk. Be cognizant of that. And yes, I'm aware that there's lots of platforms, there's lots of apps. It becomes much easier to sort of handle your financials. And but of course, the regular stock markets, and even more so the cryptocurrency markets are volatile. I mean, you can see here on a slide, you see the sort of the Bitcoin story,
Yep.
and of course, you could have a similar slide with most other cryptocurrencies that of course, without the central bank regulating the rate of inflation and the supply of the monies, this is bound to be volatile. So, if you're really lucky, I'd say, and if you bought at the right time and sold at the right time, you could have made a ton of money. More likely than not, you didn't go in the right time and did not exit at the right time. So, you have to be careful. At the same time, if you are playing with a little bit of money, it's perhaps the best education that you can get, is that you are actually learning in a real life situation and putting your money at some risk. So in some ways, learning more about how the money markets work is good, especially in the Baltic context, where we see that the stock markets are relatively shallow. I mean, we see that the banks are dominant. They play a very important role, but in terms of the risk markets, of the venture capital, and it's relatively small. Most of that is sort of public money, which is being then managed by private teams. So. I would say that yes, of course, there are risks, as with everything in life. But playing around with a little bit of money, I'd say that this is actually be healthy for you, and you may learn some lessons, and you may even eventually end up taking a class or two in financial economics, and then that may actually bring benefit to your family, because you'll be able to invest better the earnings that you make. So. Yes, there's lots of risks for young people, but it's good that we have more accessible tools, that we no longer have to call a broker and pay a hefty commission, that the commissions are now lower. You can do it at your fingertips. But of course, with everything, you have to be careful with your money.
Okay, but, with the infamous, and I'm sure you're aware of the GameStop stock crash. Do you see that as just another potential Bank Baltic case, or do you see that, do you still, with that being a case out there, do you still look at the overall trend of investing as something that is going to turn out to be for the better?
Well, who knows? I'm old enough as an economist to be wary of making predictions. I mean, let's see who predicted the COVID crisis of the economist. Okay. If you can point to one, fair. Or the previous crisis, or where the next crisis will start, and if I knew, then I'd probably not be sitting here, but I'd be nicely in Bahamas and be quite fancifully rich. I don't complain now, but who knows? Who knows? You never know. There could be a bubble. There could be a crash. You see that in the 90s there was lots of internet companies being created. Lots of them went bust 10 years down the line. The market is sometimes difficult to tread. However, the trends in investing are changing, and of course the market is changing. So I'd say be careful. Keep your eyes open. Follow whatever good information that you have. And sort of diversify. That's what always if somebody asks Mārtiņš, where would you advise me to invest? And what I say, well, look, try to not put all eggs in the same basket. Try to diversify as much as possible. So not put if you're younger, you can risk a bit more. If you're not so young, you have to be more conservative. That's a financial advice usually that the funds give you. But just use all the information out there. But I'd like not to make predictions, because I know how false they can turn out, and that would be a gamble.
Okay, dear fellow investors, I hope you are taking notes on this. Really important. And as our conversation is slowly going towards end, let's talk about maybe a bit more personal subject, which is quite an important, especially during the pandemic, especially during what has it been, almost a year and a half living in lockdown, which is mental health. And knowing that you're at a position in which you are in career, can I ask you a semi or almost very personal question about...
Do I have it all together?
Have you ever had to consciously sacrifice your mental well-being to sort of pursue some of your career development or any financial gains, perhaps?
Well, I mean, you have to work hard. I mean, I think we have now a generation which thinks that, we have all these wonderful internet tools, we have digital tools, we have robots, we have artificial intelligence, we can just kind of sit back and relax and, things will be coming, right? Well, let me break it to you, to be successful in life, that's also what I'm teaching my kids, is that you have to work extremely hard. And working extremely hard, means that, yes, you sometimes sacrifice your sleep. Yes, it means that sometimes you sacrifice, a trip to Jūrmala. Hopefully not drugs and gaming that we have in here, but on your health, it can definitely have an impact. And what we see, from the data, from sort of this mental health data, is that in fact, yes, the pandemic on myself and on young people has had an effect. Not only because, you cannot see your friends, and for young people it's very important to socialize, but also because you had to adjust in a major way very quickly. Life, digitalization is fine, working on a computer is fine, but everybody, at one point you had 1 billion school kids in the world learning remotely. And this is in locations like here where you have beautiful internet, but you also have locations where there's no internet. And, the question of internet is, what is that, right? So, definitely it has had a toll on well-being. Yes, even later in life, you have to sometimes sacrifice your sort of, mental health, for your work. It's usually a balance. That's why we have so many different businesses which are trying to teach, inner peace and whatnot, meditation and other types of techniques. If that works for you, that's fine. That's excellent. But what we see from the data, we see that there's a lot of young people out there who are hardly coping, and who are finding those coping strategies which are not perhaps the best ones. We have drugs, we have alcohol, we have gaming, we have unhealthy lifestyles, sacrificing a lot of sleep every night to be doing something, gaming or whatnot. So you in fact have lots of these issues which have come to the fore, and of course sitting long hours by the computer is not healthy for your body. I mean, our bodies were not constructed in a way that we'd be spending our days behind a computer. So definitely we need to have a balance. We need to find ways to exercise, to jog, to do yoga, do whatever, just move in a way that our bodies were meant to be. But sometimes, for young people, they like to go to extremes. They like to do one thing, a little bit too much, and then not enough of the other thing. So yes, I mean, you do have to make sometimes sacrifices, and sometimes finding the balance, is called wisdom, and that sometimes takes time. But we definitely see that a good outlet of this is actually some sort of community activity or volunteering or doing something, where you're not really financially reimbursed. Because again, a whole body of studies shows that doing something because you believe in the cause actually contributes to your mental well-being. And that also takes up your time positively, which is not then spent, doing something destructive and then socially disruptive. So yeah, I mean, you do have to sacrifice things, but I think there's always a limit, and I think soon enough I will need to take a vacation. And I sincerely hope that all of you benefit from this beautiful summer that we're having here in the Baltics.
Hopefully. Is there any is there any direct impact coming from the EU that you know of to address not only just mental health in general, but the sort of the skepticism that is, especially in Latvia, towards going to a psychotherapist or going to a psychologist and talking about mental issues? Is there any information that you can talk about regarding that?
Well, certainly that's an issue that the pandemic has brought upon us, concerns about mental health and challenges. as you know, health sector in general is very much a national competence. That's something that the member states have not delegated to Brussels, and by subsidiarity, this is something that national states are taking care of. And of course, there are different challenges and different allocations for healthcare in different budgets. But Next Gen EU, for the first time in European history, has a relatively significant allocation for health. Because of the pandemic, because of the challenges, because of the disruptions, we have realized that to build resilience, to build kind of strength in the community, we need to invest in health, including mental health. And mental health is one of the 4 big priorities which Latvia has. It's the oncology, the heart and vascular diseases, mental health, and sort of mothers and child's health. So this is one of the big priorities, and there is significant investment coming into healthcare, into making the hospitals better, in making the family doctors' practices more accessible. And I know that in Latvia, especially young people's mental health has become a hot issue. There's a lot of recognition that we do not have enough help out there. And if you look at, for instance, this very sad statistic of suicides, we see, and that's of course the cardinal solution, right? That's when you have probably exhausted a lot of other and have not found help properly. Is that we see Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, the 3 Baltic states, in fact, not at the top of the scoreboard where we'd like to be. Right, especially Lithuania, but also in Latvia, we have the incidence of youth suicide way higher than it should be, which is just another indicator that there is a problem. I mean, in some ways, you can see at the graph over there, it correlates a little bit with sort of the young people at the risk of social exclusion and poverty. So there is, that you don't have the sort of the material means. Which also, of course, is an issue, because sometimes a very good psychotherapist or psychologist, it's a very expensive proposition. So sometimes you don't get access because you don't have enough specialists. That is the case in Latvia. Don't have enough good specialists. You don't have enough specialists with proper skills or a proper approach. How to and knowledge of how to talk to young people. You also have a stigma, of course, going and saying that I have a problem. You have the typical sort of teenage issues of sort of who am I, and how do I relate to my peers. But this is largely an issue which nation states have to do. But of course, yes, from the EU there's programs, there's investment into healthcare, which then inter alia can go into mental health. And this is a very important issue as we emerge from the pandemic, because we have to keep it together. We have to be able to be a complete person, to be able to take all these opportunities which are out there through Next Gen EU and other instruments. We have to be healthy enough to be able to travel, to use mobility, to study, to enter the workforce, to apply for jobs, to take all this good opportunity, all these good things. But we also have to recognize, and we have to remove the stigma somehow collectively, or the stereotype that this is your personal thing. This is not just your personal thing if you don't feel well. This is, it impacts your family, it impacts your community, your university, your school, and of course, let me maybe finish by a personal example. I'm sitting at the board of my school where my kids are going, where I also graduated, and in fact, we are now making a strategy for the next 5 years, and we talk about the green things and the digital things and all the sort of the positives. And then in one of those focus groups with kids, somebody said, we're not talking. I mean, a few years ago, somebody tried to to kill themselves in the school, right? We certainly need to address a little bit also these psychological issues in the school. And then, once one person spoke up, then a lot of other young people said, look, yes, I think we have this logoped and this and that, but I don't think we have enough support for the mental well-being. And I think this is something that we don't talk enough about. We need to talk about it enough so that people can say, yes, I can feel bad. I can honestly tell myself I don't feel well. I feel depressed. There is a problem. I'm isolated, and sort of be able to ask for help and not be said, well, no, this is your issue. If you're fun and feeling well and smiling and putting nice pictures on Instagram, that's fine. But you feel down, if you feel depressed, then deal with it yourself, right? So that people can also be empowered to share also that they don't feel well and that they have they have issues and they have problems and why they have them, and talk to people, because that can really be instrumental in helping to keep more people out of the cardinal solution. So apologies for also bringing this issue up, but this is something that is very important, especially now as we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic, which has taken a huge toll on all of us.
Hopefully, and thank you so much for taking your time to talk about it here. Perhaps we could name that just another, well, not just another, but another ice to break, and sort of say. With that, thank you so much, Mārtiņš, for being here.